Hey, hello everybody.
Hey, good morning.
We'll start in another 2 minutes. I'll let everybody join.
Yes, or good night, wherever you may be. I know it's different times across the world. It is 6 a.m. for me, so I'm just kind of waking up, but excited to be here.
Hello everyone. Hi, welcome all. Let's wait for like a couple of minutes and then we'll start.
How many of you have heard about Vana before? Maybe just like a quick heads up in the chat. Or you all are pretty new? Okay. Thanks, Ishar.
I see some familiar faces from some events and from Twitter too.
Yeah. I think Josh is here. I think you met Josh in some event. Yeah.
Hello.
Hey,
Can you
Hi,
hear me?
Josh. Hi.
Yeah.
Yes.
I got my Vana sweatshirt that you gave me.
Nice.
Nice.
Thanks.
I think we should get this started. Anyways, have you started the recording? Because all the sessions will be recorded. So we'll anyways like share this after if you're not able to join.
Yes, it's already getting called.
All right. So thank you all for joining. Hi, this is Muskan. I lead ecosystem at Vana. And I'm very excited to welcome you all to Vana Academy first session. Before Vana kind of like gives a deep dive, I'll quickly maybe like give a rundown of what exactly we'll be doing the next like 9 weeks. So Vana Academy is a 9 weeks program and it's divided into 2 phases. First phase is a boot camp and second phase is an accelerator program. So basically in the week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, we'll be getting like people about all the things related to Vana. So week 1, we have the first session, which is we'll talk about the mission and vision behind Vana. And I will kind of like give a deep dive of like why did she start like Vana at the first place and what's exactly is the vision behind Vana. Tomorrow we have Art with us. He's one of the co-founder at Vana, and we'll be talking about data sets that matter. So basically, he'll give a detailed deep dive of like what kind of data sets have like real demand and what you guys should be building in terms of data DAOs. Week 2 would be all about the technical architecture. We'll have first session on Vana protocol architecture, which like Vana engineers will take. And session 2 would be a very like a detailed workshop on how do you create a first data DAO on Vana. Week 3, we have 2 workshops. First is how do you actually deploy a token on Vana, and second is like how data access part of Vana works. I know it all sounds a lot, but don't worry, we'll make it very simple for you guys to understand. And all sessions will be very detailed, and you'll have like kind of time to ask like questions to the speaker in the end, and also like you can definitely bring your questions in the Discord as well. Week 4 and week 5 would be a building phase. We're not expecting the entire like working product from you guys in week 4, week 5, but we'll expect maybe like a detail, like a POC from you all on detailing about like what kind of data are you thinking to build, what's your project all about. So we'll have like we'll give a structure for you guys to actually share or like a more of a POC from you, but that's what we'll expect. And at the end of week 5, we'll be selecting top 7 to top 10 teams, the ideas we really like. And we enter into accelerator phase with them. We'll be actually like mentoring these 7 to top 10 to top 7 teams There'll be one-on-one office hours. We'll have some sessions about the tokenomics. We'll actually give you like support about the marketing community. So it'll be more of a 3 weeks of GTM sprint with all these like top teams. So that's how the entire program is structured. And week 9, we'll have a demo day with the top teams, where we'll actually like the teams will be presenting their ideas to Vana team, and we'll also have some like VCs and some ecosystem partners to actually take a look of what all you have built in the next 9 weeks. And along with the accelerator phase, along with all the support we'll be giving you, we'll also have some Vana rewards for all the like given to the top 7 to 10 teams, which we'll be selecting at the end of week 5. So that's how the entire program is structured. And then Discord will be the go-to place. Like whatever questions you have, just like feel free to ping in the Discord. And even if you don't have a team today, feel free to build it individually. If you need a team, like there's a channel in the Discord where you actually try to find like a team member with you. So that's how the entire communication of the program would be happening in the Discord server. Yeah. With that, I'll give it to Anna. Like she'll be talking about in detail about why did she start Vana at the first place. So yeah, over to you, Anna.
Thanks. Excited to see everyone here. Congratulations to everybody on joining Vana Academy. And thank you for kind of like all the work you put into the different applications. Awesome. So I'll go through some slides on kind of overview of Vana, some of the motivation behind starting Vana. I just saw a message that someone sent that Muskan talks really fast, which is so true. I feel like she talks at 1.5x speed, but yeah,
I'm so sorry.
in a good way, just so much information to communicate. I'll dive into some of the Vana overview, and then you'll get to meet my co-founder Art tomorrow, who will go into some specific data sets. Just to kind of like start, I have met, I think, some of you already, but I'm Anna. I'm the creator of Vana, co-founder and CEO of Open Data Labs, which is the research and development company behind Vana. Vana started, Vana started as this kind of idea, like I guess there were kind of 2 things that brought me to starting Vana. First was really this interest in decentralization, where I had been interested in like central banks. I had like a picture of Janet Yellen in my high school bedroom and had like worked at the Fed in high school, and then learned about decentralized currencies when I got to MIT, started mining ETH in my dorm room, and was like, wow, we can have kind of these distributed central banks by just kind of relying on cryptography and math rather than having to trust some central entity. And then I had gotten into kind of like training AI models at CSAIL, which is MIT's AI lab. And I always wanted access to data sets that I couldn't get access to because they were kind of inside the walled gardens of different tech companies. And what I was seeing is that really, if you wanted to train great AI, there were only a few different companies you could do that at because the data was really kind of stuck within those different walled gardens. So really the mission and kind of the vision of Vana is to build this user-owned data ecosystem where you're able to have kind of every user having control of their own data and using it across different applications, right? And kind of getting this win-win where users own their data and developers have access to really amazing data sets. I think a helpful framing to kind of keep in mind is really just AI models are statistical representations of all of their data, right? And so essentially you have kind of this way of being able to have data. That's actually good for ZK layer over data. I think that's this good framing, right? It's kind of this privacy layer over data while still being able to use it in applications. Basically every single AI model, just a statistical representation of their data. And typically that's coming from the public internet because of what's required of like training data today, where people are just taking everything available on the public internet and putting that into AI models. You might have already helped contribute to some of the leading AI models if you've posted on Reddit, but primarily it's public data that these models are trained on. I think something that often isn't immediately obvious is that the data that people train on is like this public internet stuff, which is actually a really small % of the overall data available on the internet, right? And so most of the training data is actually private, not public. So all of this stuff is not really available to AI today? Yeah, the deep and the dark web, basically everything that's not indexed by the public internet. So like anything that's not available on Google essentially without being able to sign in, that's pretty much not included in training data today, right? So if we want to make AI better, we need some way to be able to kind of get more and more data. And we're kind of like running into this data wall where, okay, we want to train better and better AI models where we have like, okay, GPT-3, okay, and then as we've scaled it, we've kind of increased compute and increased data. But now we've actually run into this limit where if you look at all the tokens available on the public internet, it's around 15 trillion tokens or words. Tokens just in the context of an AI token, not in the context of a word. And that actually is kind of everything we've used to scale to the best sort of models we have at this point. So then this question is like, where do we get more data? And something on that too is the data wall is both this issue of quality and quantity, right? So if people are familiar with DeepSeek, they kind of overcame the data wall through quality, where they started with a really high quality data set that was labeled by like math and computer science PhDs and used that data to train better AI. And then Mercor is another company that kind of has done a really good job getting really high quality data that's generated by PhD students. So when you think about data that you need for AI, it's both on the quality and on the quantity side. And kind of as companies have realized the importance of their data to AI, they've kind of made it harder for other people to access their data so that they can charge as much as possible for it, right? So you have Reddit that's kind of selling data for $200 million. Apple's buying a lot of data, paying $50 million for news data. And the internet is kind of becoming less and less open, with every siloed platform actually building like bigger walls to protect their valuable training data, right? And that's the economically rational thing for kind of each of these different platforms to do. Something that a lot of people don't realize is that all of their data, like all data that you've generated on the internet, is entirely legally yours, right? So in the same way that when you put your car into a parking lot, like the parking lot doesn't own your car, right? It's yours. And then you can always kind of like export it and get it back. Like the parking lot isn't going to tell you, okay, you can't have this back. So with every single platform, that's the same thing, right? When you put your data into Reddit or Instagram or Amazon, all of that data is yours. Often that might not be how you think about it. You might be like, oh, it's Reddit's data. But if you look at the law, it's yours. When you're signing the terms of service, you're granting them access to be able to use it and access it. But you can always go and get a copy of that. And that's true for every single data source. And that's really important in the context of building data DAOs, right? Because it actually allows anyone to build a data DAO for any platform because they're using individual data rights to allow a user to get their data back. Something I'll note here is that it can be inconvenient for users to get their data in some cases. Data regulation makes sure that kind of, for example, GDPR and CCPA, those are two data regulation sort of regimes in Europe and in California. That makes sure that every user can kind of always get their data and get the full export within 30 days or so. Oh yeah, and then yeah, kind of a good point. It's kind of actually getting access to that data can be hard even if you have, so it can be inconvenient. There are some data DAOs that have users submit that legal request to get the full export, and there are others where users will kind of be able to grant access via API. So fundamentally what Vana does is it really unlocks data from walled gardens and puts it in users' control, right? So you have kind of these walled gardens that have come up around every single kind of platform on the internet. And the Vana approach is to have every individual user take their data back across different platforms. And then you're able to kind of get it within this kind of user-owned concept where users can bring it with them throughout applications, use it to train different AI models. Yeah, I saw someone requested their Instagram and Facebook data 10 days ago, but haven't received it yet. It can kind of depend. The maximum amount of time they can give it to you in is 30 days or so, but kind of legal requirements. And it's getting better and better. There was some recent data regulation in Utah that requires kind of full interoperability and actually real-time API access to data, but it still kind of is getting better over time. Some of the core concepts, which we'll dive into more throughout Vana Academy and kind of go into deeper technical depth. One is non-custodial data. So Vana kind of allows users to manage their data just like their funds. So you're actually signing transactions to be able to grant access to your data, which is really cool, right? If you think about like usually, I think one of the really cool things about Bitcoin and Ethereum is that you're the true controller of your funds. Like it's not like Bitcoin is acting as your bank, like you are your own bank. And so Vana is kind of this similar thing where like you are your own data controller and processor. So you're basically able to sign transactions and grant access to your data in like full control. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Vana kind of helps with both using the data without revealing kind of the underlying stuff, any underlying information, and then also provides kind of a standardized way for data DAOs to take it out of different platforms and add it into the network. The other important concept on Vana is called proof of contribution. So if I take my data on its own, so for example, like my WhatsApp data or my Telegram data, that data alone isn't really enough to train an AI model, right? I would need to kind of combine it with many different people's data. And so if all of us on this call all put our data together of like, okay, let's have all 75 of us combine this data, then someone could try to pretend to be 200 people, right? And they could try to take control over the data set, right? And so when you're having a large group of people contribute their data, you need some way of checking quality. And so proof of contribution is checking quality and basically mapping data, which is necessarily different for everybody, into some uniform score. And that allows for the aggregation of data to kind of combine it together. In terms of what's possible to build on Vana, there are kind of different categories of applications I'll get into. The major category is these data DAOs, which are kind of the fundamental unit of Vana, which are tokenizing and aggregating data sets that are governed by a group of users. And so that's primarily what we'll focus on for Vana Academy. But you have these downstream applications that are possible to build on top of your data DAO. So I'll cover some of those as well. I think examples can be really helpful. So maybe just first, what is a data DAO? A data DAO is an aggregated data set that's kind of verified and controlled by the whole group of users. So it's kind of this data set. You can think of it a little bit like a labor union for data, but everything is fully enforced on chain. So the way that the data set is owned is kind of truly cryptographically enforced. I think, yeah, examples can be helpful. So the car data DAO, which is one of the ones that they actually were in an early version of an accelerator program we had last year, and they just raised their seed round. So they have people aggregate their car data. That includes like telemetry data and other kind of location information, and they sell that to car battery companies. This is founded by Ryan. So yeah, if you want to, he's probably in Discord. If you want to, like, if you have any questions or want to ping him about stuff like that. DevDoc is another one that has an integration into like VS Code. And so essentially what that does is it allows people to automatically contribute their coding data as they code. And then the Reddit Data DAO, which is one of the largest ones, they have over 140,000 users who kind of contributed their Reddit data. And they're now training, they've trained kind of this user-owned LLM, and they're part of Collective One, which I'll talk about a little bit later, which is a foundation model that's trained on data from across Vana. Data can be contributed in a bunch of different ways. So it can be from physical devices, integrations with workflows, GDPR, exports, APIs, also kind of Chrome extensions. And so if you want to, yeah, YKYR has a Chrome extension if you want to check that one out. And a lot of these are also all kind of like open source. So if there's something similar that you want to build, like the Twitter one has like a scraper and stuff like that, you can go and check out their repositories. That can be a helpful reference too. In terms of the ownership mechanics, like I think the question is like, what does it mean to own part of a data set, right? Like, what does that even mean? Like, and sort of, okay, what, like tactically, what does that mean? So basically, when users contribute data, they get VRC20 tokens proportional to how much they've kind of helped the data set, right? And that depends on proof of contribution. So if you have contributed data that's more important, then you have more ownership, or less important, then it kind of smaller in size. And then as data buyers and kind of companies access the data set, they burn that data token. And they burn in this ratio of like 80% of the data token, 20% Vana, which also covers the cost of compute. And what that enables is that users are basically jointly owning and governing these data sets, right? And so what you're able to do, and this is an example of Reddit granting access to Flower AI to train their model. You can see, I guess, it wasn't that controversial. 98.5% of people voted like, yes, we want to grant access. So I think people were kind of on board. Yes, we want to do this with our data, but they're ultimately the ones kind of who are making the decision on the data set. And what that's really allowing for is kind of creating almost like this term. So when you dive into the kind of technical details of Vana, you might hear the term data liquidity pool, DLP, which is kind of this technical term for the aggregated data set, which the Data DAO can then make decisions over. And so maybe I'll just pause for a second. Any question on Data DAOs specifically, or any of what I covered so far?
I see one from Tushar, Anna, like they'll have their own VRC20 token, and then there'll also be Vana token too. And if someone have to buy data, then they need to have both the tokens.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, for each Data DAO, they have their own VRC20 token. And then there's also the Vana native token. So if you're familiar with Ethereum, similar to how you have kind of ETH as the native asset, and then different ERC20 tokens, Vana works in a similar way. And then for someone to buy the data, they need to have both the tokens. Yeah, there's they can do an automatic swap as well. And I'll also mention, I'll just pull up actually TensorSource. So some companies have never heard of a Data DAO and maybe just don't even know kind of what that necessarily means or how that should impact them. And so there's a company called TensorSource, which is run by Sam, who I think will be around during the go-to-market sprint as well. And what they do is really abstract away everything related to kind of crypto specifically on Vana, so that people who want to access data can just pay in US dollars and actually be able to get access to data sets without having to think about kind of all the intricacies that might come with tokens and kind of stuff like that. So that's kind of this like, I'd say more of like an abstraction layer to make it easier for companies that aren't as familiar with tokens to be able to access that data. And then let me see on the not using Vana token only. Yeah, so actually there's like an automatic swap. Like if you can basically just pay in Vana as well, and then there's an automatic swap that happens. And if you currently, I don't know if anyone, if you have built a DLP that currently supports data access, there's a migration happening right now where like you can basically just pay in Vana, and then it's pure Vana, and then there's kind of the upgrade where it's like the data token and the Vana token. Yeah, but that can be abstracted away. There's kind of like an automatic swap. Who pays the gas fees for the swap? I believe the gas fees are paid by when the transaction is initiated. So it is like either the data buyer or TensorSource on behalf of the data buyer. Thank you for these, yeah, super detailed questions. Any other questions about examples, different Data DAOs? I saw someone was asking about a case study on the Reddit Data DAO as well. Is there a doc with references? Yeah, yes, there are a variety of docs. Oh, on Data DAOs. Yeah. Actually, there's a blog post. I'll send that one. With like covering a bunch of different Data DAOs and kind of some of what they're doing on Data DAOs. This one. Cool. So I guess the way you can think about a data DAO is it is this kind of fundamental unit that tokenizes a data set. And on top of that, you're able to kind of have different applications that are built on top of kind of that data as the underlying asset. I think one of the interesting applications, this is kind of covering financial applications you can build on top of data as an asset, where you're able to like use data as collateral for loans, right? So as a user, if you have this kind of like valuable data set, then you're able to like actually take a loan against it. This is kind of, yeah, a lot of this DataFi stuff is relatively early. But yeah, being able to monetize data without selling ownership. There's a data DEX on Vana, and there are a couple of, maybe I'll pull up a few of the projects that are kind of building. So this one is not, I actually am not totally sure on exactly what this is. They're basically making a way for people to be able to trade data in perpetuity. I'm not sure exactly how this is, yeah, so I'm not sure what the latest exactly on this, but this is, I think, a good example of the sorts of things that are possible. And then there's also like a DEX, I think that this is the right, yeah, data DEX, where you can kind of trade between different data tokens. There's another, this is just another interface to be able to see the different data tokens. So if you're already in, if you're coming from the crypto world, this might make sense. If you are coming from outside the crypto world, you actually don't have to think about any of this. And so if this is just like, yeah, totally foreign, that's not a problem. Cool. So that is kind of data as an asset class. And the way we really see it is that kind of zooming out to think about like data ownership, why it matters. I think a lot of people, when you first hear about this idea that like users should own their data, might see it as like purely a social cause, right? Which I kind of believe in very like ideologically as well. But another lens to look at it is that it's actually just like a market failure, right? Where like a user is creating this like piece of data that they own, but there's really no way for a market around the data to exist. And like the question of like, well, how much is like all of your health information worth? Like, okay, probably a lot, but it's very hard for a person to see that or actually act on that, right? And so really, I think a lot of what unlocks this like user-owned data economy is actually just solving this market failure problem, where like people are unaware of all of this value that they're kind of creating from their data. Oh yeah, so then with all of the data that's kind of aggregated and available on Vana, AI applications can access cross-platform data, right? So what that means is that users are basically able to kind of pool their data, make it available in these data DAOs, and then developers can access that data from across different data DAOs in privacy-preserving ways. So I'll pull up, sorry to keep switching between screens, but I want to show a demo. So this is like a data explorer where you can actually like look at some of the data. This is just synthetically generated data. This isn't real data. So this data here is basically like showing some of the available data from across different users. So you can see like for a given user, you have kind of Google data, Spotify data, kind of when it was listened to, what music they're listening to, then Telegram, and Aura, there's a sleep data now. So what this is showing is that data is actually joined through a user's wallet as identity. And this query is run inside of a secure environment, and then you can train an AI model on this. But I think what's helpful here is kind of from a developer lens in thinking about the data that's available on Vana, you can almost think of it as this like massive database that just contains like all data from across all different platforms and has native permissions baked into it and native incentives too. So you're able to kind of pay for the data and access the data that you want without having to get necessarily like API access, et cetera, from all the different platforms. Okay, so let me pause and take some questions. Yes, okay, so first on like who will decide the value of the data set? That's a great question, which is like this very, I think, actually fundamental question about the value of data, right? Like how much is a given data point worth, even relative? So there are two aspects of it, like how much is my data worth relative to my friend's data if within the same data source? right? So think like, okay, we're just talking about Google location data. How much is our relative data worth? And that's solved through proof of contribution, which is mapping kind of different given data point to a fungible score. But then there's also the question of like, how much is a data set overall worth, right? So for like a VRC20 token, this data token, how much is that data set worth? And that is solved more at the kind of like market level. And so basically allowing for data tokens to actually be tradable allows for the economic equilibrium to actually find the value of that data set, because you're tying the data set to its kind of access and how it's used. And so, yeah, that's on that side. And then do you actively create ways to get data buyers to see? Yes, and I think Muskan can talk more about that as well. And then my co-founder, Art, used to work in data sales, like selling data to big tech. And so tomorrow in his presentation, data sets that matter, he'll kind of dive deep into that. And he'll also cover kind of what data sources are the most important that are kind of different demand, like basically what's happening on the demand side. And kind of there's this constant like matching going on, right? Where you have the data DAOs that are supplying data, and then you have kind of the data access side where people are wanting these different data sources. And I'll actually cover one of the AI models that's being trained right now. So yeah, this is some of the available data. If you go and look at the different data DAOs across Vana, basically every one of those data sources is kind of available to be able to train on if the users grant access. Something that we announced a few months ago that I think is like this really exciting milestone for the ecosystem is Collective One, which is a user-owned foundation model. And maybe just to take like a quick step back, like what is a foundation model? Foundation model is basically a base AI model. So it's like, think like GPT-3 or GPT-4, Llama. It's like when you're training an AI model from scratch and creating this really powerful general AI model. And usually these AI models are only created by a small number of large companies, right? So like OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, they've kind of trained these base models. And whoever controls these base models, I think, has a lot of influence on society in two ways. The first is like these base models and foundation models are generating a huge amount of revenue, right? And so it's kind of becoming this like place of economic concentration. And then the other piece is that whoever controls these like base foundation models is kind of also controlling truth to some extent in the world. Like, I don't know if people remember the Google Bard example where if you searched and asked Google Bard for a historically accurate picture of a medieval prince, it would show you like an Indian woman, right? And I think a lot of people are like, oh, it's this crazy kind of wokeness or censorship of the 2020s. But really, like, if there weren't another source of truth, people would just start believing that and just start thinking like, oh, that's just like how the world works or how history went down. So what Collective One is doing is really going beyond web scrape data and training a full foundation model across a bunch of different data DAOs on Vana. And this is a joint project between Flower AI, which is a Web2 AI company, and kind of Vana and all the different data DAOs. Right now, they're training just on text-based data, but future versions will include multimodal data, video data, audio data. And the first version of it is 7 billion parameters. We hope to scale that up to 100 billion parameters. But what's cool is like, even with 7 billion parameters, that is something that people didn't think was possible a year ago, right? And so just to really emphasize, like, I think that a lot of the kind of dominant narrative that exists today is that centralized AI is kind of the only way. And I think that's really not the case, and it's kind of shifting so quickly. And so that 7 billion parameter model is like, a year ago, people would be like, yeah, that's not possible. And it is kind of, yeah, now possible. So it's a really cool technical milestone. In terms of how the training actually works, so basically users contribute data to these different data DAOs on Vana. So they contribute their Reddit data, their Twitter data. The Telegram data DAO, I think, has like 6 million messages in it. So they have like a ton of messages now. The data remains in secure compute that's controlled by the DAOs. So the DAOs are voting to grant access to Flower so they can train in the environment. And then model training happens using Flower's federated learning framework, kind of running in this secure compute environment, and then being able to scale this process to kind of millions of contributing users. And so because it's being trained in a federated way, you're just training pieces of it on each data DAO and then combining them together. I think what's interesting about this is like when you have collective ownership of data sets, you can also have collective ownership of an AI model, right? So you can have a system where like every time someone's interacting with an AI model, the users are actually getting paid based on how much their data helped the AI model. So you have this full kind of end-to-end loop where you're actually able to kind of have this win-win. I think that often the situation that we end up in kind of AI today is like, there's a lot of fear related to AI of like, what if AI takes my job, right? Or like, what if AI kind of is all powerful and really changes the labor market? But I think if you have proper attribution, where like, if you taught AI how to do something, you have ownership of that AI, then it really is this kind of like win-win for everyone, right? Where you can have really powerful AI, but you can also have like strong kind of ownership, and you're not in the situation where you have this extreme centralization. Okay, so a question on derivative data DAOs. So kind of if there's this DLP token as a first derivative, that is actually, I've never been asked that question before. Like, so there's no technical reason why that shouldn't be possible to basically create these iterative DLPs. I would want to think a little bit more about exactly how it would play out from like both a proof of contribution of like where are you restoring the data, and then from an economic perspective as well. But there's no immediate reason why that wouldn't work. In terms of like, I see, so someone said like the reason I asked, if you have just one DLP, but it's very broad, then the DLP contributors might feel diluted, right? So to maybe put an example behind that, say you have I'm trying to think of a good, like, yeah, maybe it's actually the Tesla one is kind of interesting. So say you have a bunch of Tesla data, and you've got like video streams from everyone driving their Tesla cars. And it turns out that actually only 1% of that data set is really important, right? It's like the 1% where people are like driving in the rain and there's a construction site, kind of these edge cases. Or another example could actually be on the health side, right? Maybe data DAO is being used for rare diseases. And so wanting to look at health data of a specific subset of users. I think there are two ways to handle that situation. So one is your proof of contribution you should try to get it to reflect the marginal value of each user into the data set. So you can try to structure your proof of contribution so that you're really rewarding the users who are contributing that data that has like asymmetric value. So that kind of small percent of the data. And then the other thing is, potentially brokering a deal with the data DAOs where you're able to actually kind of selectively say, this is the data that we want, and this is how we want to be able to reward the users. And so that's kind of like another, maybe design area. That would be the first time it would be being done on Vana, but I think there's no like technical reason why that shouldn't work. And so now just kind of making sure some of the questions. How to store all this data. So that's a good question, right? Like you've got a massive amount of data. How does storage actually work? So Vana is storage agnostic. So you can basically use any storage provider as an individual user. That means you're actually controlling your storage. So you can like connect your Google Drive or your Dropbox with your data in it. The thing then though is that as a user, like if you join a data DAO, you're controlling your storage. What if you like delete or remove your data, right? So in that case, the DLP is basically like storing a copy of the data, which is encrypted with a key that's controlled by the data DAOs. And that's kind of built in, and we'll get into in some more kind of technical detail. Thanks for all the questions too. More of a passive income right now or more of an entrepreneurial endeavor? I think it depends. So I think that for some people, like with Reddit, I think that for some people it is a financial motivation to contribute their data. For other people, it's more of this almost like wanting to be part of this like movement of like, hey, what could be possible? And it kind of depends on the data DAO too. Like, I think that for the car one, I think some of it is a financial motivation. I think some of it is also kind of like, I would say maybe like a future financial motivation, which is rather than thinking of it as like, I want to make $20 for my data. I think some people are thinking of it as like, I want a stake in the future of AI. I can actually pull up some of the
I think that's right, and I think there's potential for this to be like a long-term investment, almost like a 401k.
Yeah.
Start early and let your data accrue like an asset over time. I think that's definitely one way to think about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great framing, right? Of really like data as this kind of like asset, which is increasingly important kind of as AI gets better and better and kind of more reliant on data. Okay, and then let me just make sure. Oh, one question is on the DLP tokens, can they only natively be on Vana? So in order for, let me just go back here. Basically, in order to be able to use kind of the proof of contribution, which is the verification method, and then data access, which is kind of gating access to the data, the VRC20, like these DLP data tokens, they need to be on Vana to be able to essentially use the data and kind of have it back as data. That said, the tokens can be bridged to other chains for trading and stuff like that. And so I don't know, I think Nate is someone who's kind of building one of the earliest ones to bridge to Solana. I don't know if Nate is here. So there are kind of things, if you want to build in a specific ecosystem, or that is kind of already where you want your token to trade, and you have kind of a tie there, then you can basically do some bridging. And so, yeah, there are specific bridges people have requests for. Let us know too. Okay, so let me just make sure. Oh, the last thing, and then I'll go back to some questions to talk about is actually data portability. And I think a lot of people, I'd say this is kind of like an underappreciated aspect about Vana, which I would say like it's okay if people kind of aren't aware of it, but I think is actually long-term extremely important. And so what Vana does, like when you're joining a data DAO, you're tying your data to your wallet. And then you're able to use that data at an individual level across different applications, right? And so with this example, kind of I have my MetaMask wallet, which ties in my sleep data, my health data, and my genetic data. And then I can bring that into another application and actually have that personalized around me, right? And I think often as a kind of, this is more at the consumer level, but if you're building like a consumer AI application, it's really hard to compete with big companies who already have a lot of context on a user, right? When a user comes in to a new platform, you don't know very much about them. It's hard to kind of customize the sort of like application and product to them. But what this allows for is like a user to come in and already have all of the context that they can grant access to. And so I think there are a lot of cool applications of this longer term. Cool. So kind of going back to the different categories of applications of what's possible on Vana. So the data DAO is basically tokenizing and kind of aggregating data sets that are governed by a group of users. This is where the kind of data token, VRC20 tokens are created. And then on top of that, DataFi applications, I think Josh's framing of really thinking about data as like equity or kind of 401k, I think that's like really relevant, especially for these DataFi applications. Third, AI applications that are accessing the data. So Collective One is kind of one major example of this. And there are some different models being trained in the ecosystem. There's one user behavior model that somebody is training. If you're coming from an AI perspective, maybe I'll just give like a couple sentences on that. So maybe people saw Stripe's foundation model where they're training it on like transaction level data, and that's the core unit. There's someone named Giovanni who's training a model where like a user is kind of the core unit of representation within the AI model. So kind of really good at understanding and predicting user behavior. And finally, data portability. So being able to kind of personalize applications with portable data at the individual user level. I think that, yeah, this is also a very high level kind of overview. A lot of the technical questions we'll get into kind of like a lot of the meat of it throughout Vana Academy. But let me just go back and make sure that I'm answering all of the questions. Okay, so, one question is on how does Vana secure data for training AI models? I'll actually pull up some docs on the data access layer to just kind of show some of that. These are awesome questions. Thank you so much. I'm glad we're kind of getting into this level of detail. So just gonna pull up a diagram. Cool, so this is on the privacy preserving question. Okay, so by the way, there's an update coming to our docs next week, which will kind of make a lot of this. We've kind of incrementally added a lot of stuff to the documentation. So we're doing kind of like this full simplification, which should make it a lot easier to navigate because there's kind of a lot going on right now. So in terms of how data access works in Vana, it's gated at 2 levels. So when a user, so users contribute data, it's aggregated into these data DAOs. So think about kind of a pool of data, like Reddit data, 100,000 users worth of data, kind of available in this secure environment. When someone requests access to the data, they need to specify 2 things. The first is the query that they want to run on the data. So that is actually a SQL query that specifies exactly what fields they want access to in the data set. So they could say, I want access to public posts or comments, but I don't want access to like direct messages or something like that. And then they also specify a compute job that runs in the compute engine, which is any kind of general Docker image, which basically takes that data and then runs that kind of operation on the data and only returns the result. Right. And so there are many different kind of privacy preserving approaches you can use there. Like the assumption here is that the data DAO can look at the code and the query that is kind of specified to run on the data and decide, okay, is this sufficiently privacy preserving? Is this kind of are we okay with this running on our data? And we're working on more and more kind of automatic ways to be able to do that evaluation. But what's cool is this kind of allows users to like rent their data. Often when you work with data, you have, we call it internally like this double spend problem, where like if I give you my data, it's hard for me to know like whether you could give somebody else data, right? And so what this kind of privacy preserving like data access engine allows for is really like granting access to data while making sure that you aren't having some kind of like double spend going on. Okay, so, does that answer the question on privacy preserving? Okay, feel free to add on if that doesn't. Okay, so can DLP builders provide core services like subnets without creating a VRC20 token? And how would that work to incentivize its communities and builders? I think, I'm trying to think, like, I guess if you're creating a DLP without a VRC20 token and you're creating a data DAO without a VRC20 token, I'm not sure how you would handle data access or basically data contributors having ownership over that. And so I think that is an open question. I think there could be a way if you set the VRC20 token to be non-transferable, which is not really how it's designed, but yeah, there isn't, basically, Ralph, to your question, there isn't an immediate way to make that possible. If you have like a specific use case in mind of like, oh, I think this would work really well, feel free to drop that in Discord and I can think more about like what might work there. Are there certain categories of data that are useful, popular, interesting? Good question. Okay, so there are, I mean, it's kind of like this exploding space. Like there are so many, like actually some of the data DAOs will surprise me. Like I've gotten to learn a lot about health data from Josh, actually, who like was telling me that you can actually get full EHR exports from different health systems like Epic. I think that health is a really interesting category. Another category that I think is really interesting is data for robotics. Maybe one anecdote there. I was talking to a friend who has a robotics company, and they're telling me that they can't get the data that they need, and they actually bought a cleaning company so they could make the cleaners wear video cameras on themselves so they could get that video data. of like doing like folding sheets and laundry and stuff like that. So I think that's like an interesting category of data. And then Art will go into more of this tomorrow in his presentation on kind of data sets that matter. Maybe to give you some kind of intuition on what to think about there. Really think about like what AI isn't good at today, right? Because it learns from the data, right? So kind of cases of like, okay, what's AI bad at? And then like, oh, okay, like what data then would the AI probably need? That's like maybe one kind of intuition to use on that side. Does this overlap with generative AI for data buyers? Yeah, so 100% on the generative AI side. There are some data DAOs that are working with kind of more classic ML models. So like the car battery degradation forecasting I mentioned for the car data DAO, that's more of a classical model. But like Flower AI, they're training a generative AI model, kind of this LLM, which is able to like, yeah, produce kind of new text and kind of falls in that generative category. Okay, how does Vana ensure seamless and secure data portability across different applications? That's a good question. So there are kind of two layers to using data on Vana. One is using data at the aggregate level, where you're kind of accessing data from a whole data DAO or DLP. And then the other is at the individual level. So that's kind of the data portability case. So I see you're kind of asking like, how can an individual user grant access to the application to be able to use their data without revealing the underlying data? And for that, essentially, like the application can just run inference on a user's data to be able to use that. And then we use kind of like this lightweight personal server, basically just client side, where you can do client side operations. For example, encrypt your data as a user before you add it to the network. Is it after the first few? I'm not sure. Muskan, I think, will know on some of the timing for the teams and the setup of the program. But yeah, thanks for all these questions. These are awesome questions, super energizing. And just to like, congrats again to everyone in this program. Like, I think that user-owned data and kind of building with data as an asset is really this new frontier, right? This new kind of, I think, place to be able to build a new like technical primitive, as well as kind of new market that has formed. And it actually, I've been telling, it reminds me a lot, I think, of the early days of like Ethereum and kind of what if of like, oh, like what's even possible now? Okay, how do we do this? And how do we have the right kind of programs to learn about these different things? And so, yeah, I think, yeah, congratulations on kind of like joining and really being at this frontier of learning to work with this new kind of primitive. Yeah, so I'll pass it back to Muskan. If anyone has any follow-up questions, I'll be on Slack too, or on Discord as well. Oh, okay, wait, a couple more questions. Let me answer these real quick. Yes, so on the kind of like natural data contributions, Zoro, I saw you in Discord too, asking some questions. Thanks for joining. So this would, yeah, and there are some DLPs that do this. So like DevDoc has an integration where it's basically like automatically contributing people's data. The other one, YKYR, they basically have a browser extension that is like passively contributing data on that side. Yeah, I think that would definitely make data collection kind of more seamless and reducing friction for users. So depending on the data source you want, I think that could be a really good approach. Okay, someone thinks they're missing out on some. Okay, if that's a technical question, we can answer it. Or if it's kind of like this missing out, like come and build a data DAO, then like 100%, like, yeah. Okay, all data pipelines. So in terms of data pipelines, a lot of that is actually done at the data DAO level to integrate with different kind of Web 2 platforms. There are not data DAOs for Twitch or YouTube. Those I think actually would be very good data DAOs. I think that, yeah, so what Vana does is kind of define like a protocol level spec of this is how data comes into the network and this is how data can be accessed and kind of standardized. But for specific data integrations, that's actually up to the data DAO on how they want to design that. Oh, good question. So this is on enterprise buyers who want to buy aggregated data to train their models on their own infrastructure. So there actually are some cases like this where there's like a large Fortune 500 fashion company that's just very particular about like exactly how they work with their data. And so the way that can work is basically having a legal contract that says, okay, rather than using and requiring that the data is only in the secure environment, the data is allowed to leave, but it has to follow these kind of like legal requirements of not being able to access that data. So that is on the kind of enterprise buyer side. That's also kind of a workaround on the side where if you need extremely large GPU capacity, like training in a data center, that's like an option that can work too. Okay, cool. Someone is building a quantum ML model where quantum data is purely physical and not open sourced by labs. Yeah, that's actually a really, and then the question is, do you think Vana can help us to incentivize labs to access data so we can accelerate hybrid models? Yeah, I think that's very interesting. I think that is a great use case. The question would be basically, how do you verify the quantum data coming in? Like, how do you know if it's good data or not? And so that would be the proof of contribution implementation. Okay, someone wants me to simply state Vana's vision and mission. Okay, so yeah, Vana's mission is for users to own their data and the value that it creates. So it's really to kind of like deliver that vision of data sovereignty, where users are the ones who control their data. And as a result of that, developers have access to amazing data sets. Thanks for that question. What if you don't want this data anymore? Okay, so also, okay, I do have to hand it back to Muskan so we don't go over, but I will just quickly answer a few of these. Data DAOs are responsible for implementing proof of contribution. That's done in Python code, but there are some templates available to make that easier. Benefits to the user, if they're contributing data, they are getting back data tokens. So they're getting back ownership of the data set that they've helped to create. And they can use that for passive income if they choose to sell the data tokens or use it within DeFi. Okay, so we've been pushing Vana in the Philippines. Yeah, my co-founder and I are both, I'm half Filipino and Art is fully Filipino. What would be the best way for, I think the best way would be for you, students to be able to try out some of the data DAOs. And so, yeah, that would be kind of the immediate thing there. Okay, cool. So I will hand it back to Muskan on kind of next steps. Thank you for all the questions. Like, I really appreciate these. I actually think we'll save some of these questions and we'll use them as we kind of iterate on the documentation. So if you have any other questions, definitely, yeah, you can still post them here. You can post them in Discord and we'll be around throughout the whole program, right? So don't feel like, oh, I need to ask Anna the question right now. Like I'll be around and so I can keep on answering these too. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. So yeah, I'll pass it back to you then, Muskan.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks for joining. Thank you all for joining, guys. Tomorrow, I think we'll have a session on data sets that matter. So like we'll kind of like give a detailed dive on like what kind of data sets actually matters. And at the end of the presentation, I will also share like one Notion doc where we'll kind of like give a top 10 to 12 set of data sets which Vana needs. Well, you don't need to kind of like just build that. It's completely up to you, but that'll kind of give you a little like a guidance about like what kind of data sets actually matters. So yeah, I think thank you all for joining. Feel free to ask all the questions in the chat. We'll be all around. And yeah, thank you so much. See you tomorrow, guys. Bye.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Bye.